I was one of the few people that were still kind of, I mean, I'm a defense attorney through and through, so I was arguing for the defense, on HLN, and oh my God, I was getting hate mail, and I was getting phone calls at my office telling me what a horrible person I was, and after a while I made a game of it, and I would do a hit on HLN, and then I watched my Twitter feed, and I would just try to do something just to see how many negative comments I could get in a row, and but it was a really, really wild ride. It was.
Some would say, and this was the OJ of 2015. What was your thoughts as we wrapped up Jodi Arias and Bremner?
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Well, I just thought that people were mesmerized by that trial. I mean, even my mother was, and she doesn't watch anything that I cover. And I think it was just because she was such a train wreck, and it was so amazing that she claimed self-defense. How many times, Dwane, did she stab him and then shot him?
Like 27 times.
Yeah, I mean, like, what? It's just, but it just fascinated people, and I can only imagine what you went through, Dwane, in terms of hate mail, because that was a case that got people really, really, really upset. And upset at her, and maybe it was her nonchalance and kind of her, she was on the stand as long as some of the Nuremberg defendants, explaining, what had happened, and somehow talking about the bad things that Travis had done, etc. So I just think it was so different from a lot of trials that we cover, in that it was fascinating to people. It wasn't really polarizing. I mean, I think most people really didn't like her, but it just brought out extreme ire and hatred, and I'm sure that's what you saw, and that's unfortunate. But it was hard for me to watch that trial because I just couldn't believe anything she said, and I felt so bad for Travis's family throughout all of it. It was just a real tragedy because he was basically attacked once and then again in the courtroom, so it's always hard to watch.
And let me ask you, and I'll ask Alex also, do you think at times Juan Martinez overdid it a little? Like when he was cross-examining Alice Labette, the doctor, things like when he screamed oh my goodness gracious, do you think he went over the line a little? I found it to be offensive. I'm an ex-prosecutor and a defense attorney, and I don't think you have to just get that in people's faces and the yelling and the screaming. He was the most kind of demonstrative that way of anyone I've seen in a case that I've covered. And it got old because it was always the same tone, kind of, it was just high-pitched, fever-pitched cross-examination. And especially with experts, I think that can backfire. Absolutely. And Alex Sanchez, let me go to you on that. That was a huge trial. You've seen a lot of big trials like the Menendez brothers, OJ, Ted Bundy, and whatnot here in the tri-state area. But this one takes the cake of 2015, 14, a little of 13, and the years before it. To sum it up, what was your take of the Jodi Arias trial?
That was one of the few trials that I found it was almost mesmerizing to watch her either on television interviews or during the trial. And the thing that stands out is how articulate she was.
That's true.
She had an incredible command of the English language. She sounded like a very educated person to me.
Yeah,
and not only did she use big words and concepts, but her body language. She seemed refined. She seemed that she had the ability to express herself with her hands, and she had poise. And it's so inconsistent with someone that was engaged in this monstrous, brutal act of stabbing and shooting and cutting his throat and everything else that he did. So that really stood out in my mind. And the other thing that stood out in my mind was this guy, Juan Martinez. To me, there was an element of desperation that permeated his presentation in that court. He wanted to win too badly. He wanted it so badly that I think at least one of the jurors saw this and said, you know, Mr. Martinez, you have to be stopped. You want this too badly. And we don't want prosecutors in our country to want death too badly for anybody. And therefore, we're not going to give you what you want. And as far as I'm concerned, Martinez lost that case, and Jodi Arias won.
Dwane, let me get you to respond to what Alex is saying. Do you agree with that or disagree?
I do. You know, Juan Martinez looks at every problem as a nail and his only tool's a hammer. I mean, you know, that he just
sledgehammer.
You know, and after a while, it just gets, you know, you sometimes you scream at people for effect, but when you scream all the time, there really is no effect anymore. But I saw him do one thing that really disgusted me was they had one witness and an expert, and I don't remember who it was, but they needed to take some testimony outside the presence of the witness, outside the presence of the jury. And Juan asked him one question, and he gave an answer like, well, I'm not sure, something like that. And Juan Martinez screamed at him for 15 minutes. And, you know, just the only reason he did that was so that when the jury came back in, that this guy would be gun-shy about answering questions. And it worked. And quite frankly, it did. I mean, he had all the – I mean, the expert witnesses were scared to death to say anything because LaViolette basically lost her career for a while.
That's right.
I mean, you know, based on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I just don't think that's. I mean, had I been the defense attorney, there'd probably have been a fist fight at the podium before I let him get away with it as much as he did. I'm serious. I'd have come out of my shoes. I would have. I would have come out of my shoes.
Than the counsel for Jodi?
Absolutely. I would have come out of my shoes. I would have. You know, if the judge let him keep doing it, you know, if he wanted to turn it into a circus, I would have played circus with him, and we'd had a circus, you know, but he intimidated everybody. The judge couldn't stop it. The defense attorneys, you know, couldn't stand up and stop it, and he was just a runaway. He was a runaway train, and I'm a short guy too. I got short man's disease too. He and I would have had fun.
Well, that runaway train crashed. That runaway train was stopped because
I agree.
I agree.
I agree. That's what there's. I agree with you that that's why there was no death penalty.
This is a perfect example of why we need juries. Because if you didn't have juries in this country, you'd have a judge that may have been intimidated. Instead, you have juries that have no allegiance to the prosecution, and all you need is one person on that jury to say stop. And I'm glad they stopped it.
That's an excellent point. And look at Oscar Pistorius now. We have a reversal.
Let me make one more comment, though. You know, I think this whole thing would have been totally different had they somehow convinced her to go on a second-degree murder, you know, charge, to shoot for second-degree murder. Because it was. I mean, it was a passion. It was a crime of passion. It was 27 stab wounds, shot, drugged, beat. She could have found out that he was going with the other girl to Mexico, and she lost her mind and killed him. A jury could buy second-degree murder. They weren't going to buy self-defense. I don't care what she said.
They could have bought second-degree, though. You're saying?
I believe they could have.
But she was no easy, picnic to deal with, from what I hear. And
Jodi ran the defense, and she came up with the defense, and she stuck with the defense. So, when you're a lawyer, sometimes you're just stuck with it.
And Dwane, you were there also. What about these allegations that he was taking pictures with the fans and giving autographs? A, is it true? And B, is it unethical if it is true?
He did it one time, and I was actually out there when he did it. Normally they got a bridge they can go across when he goes back to his office, But one day he came out the front door, and there was a bunch of court watchers that were there, the people that were there every day, and they ran up to him, and the cane lady said, "Sign my cane," and he did, and they took some pictures, and they did some stuff, and I'm sure he regrets it afterwards. I don't think it's per se unethical, because you're not allowed. Technically, he's not allowed to really discuss the trial. Okay, he didn't make any statements about what's going on, but he did go out and revel in the glory of the fans.
Absolutely. Okay, this is a very big story that happened. Donald Trump.
We're going to turn now to my interview with the newest candidate for president, billionaire Donald Trump. The real estate mogul, reality TV star, has flirted with running in the past. Yesterday, he made it official for the first time, joining the Republican field with a rollicking speech that ended with this stark conclusion.
Sadly, the American dream is dead.
Right after I asked him about that line. The American dream is dead. Now, are you worried at all voters going to hear that and say, hey, that Donald Trump, he doesn't love America. He doesn't believe in America.
I love America so much, George, and I see what's going on with regulation. I see what's going on with the hatred that everybody has for each other. You look at Baltimore, you look at Cleveland, you look at all of the places, it's just exploding. We have an African-American president that we've never had it so bad. You look at what's happening. We're in a big bubble. We have a phony stock market. We have artificially induced interest rates that are very low.
Our polling shows you have an uphill fight, 71% unfavorable.
Well, it could be. And you know what? I've always heard if you're very successful, if you're a really big success, and I'm a really big success.
Those numbers are as bad as Vladimir Putin.
Well, but a lot of people are in those numbers because they said I'm not running. You know that too. It said that. So those numbers are up there. Now, in the meantime, I was number 3 in New Hampshire in a recent poll. I was number 4 in New Hampshire. I'm doing well in Iowa. I'm doing well all over the place, actually.
You say you have a foolproof strategy to defeat ISIS.
Nobody would be tougher on ISIS than Donald Trump. Nobody. I do.
But you're not going to tell anybody what it is.
Well, I'm going to really have to, and I might as well start now. I hate to tell people, because if I win, I don't want ISIS to know. I don't want them.
But if you're
part of the problem,
this strategy is foolproof, don't you have a moral duty to say what it is?
Well, somebody should call me from the administration. I would love somebody to call me and say, we heard about it.
What is the strategy?
The problem is you're going to see it, and so is everybody else, and so is the enemy. But I will tell you that ISIS has taken what I said we should take, the oil. And you knock out that oil. You just knock the hell out of the oil, and you have to go in and take the oil. You kill them at the head. It's over. They took the oil from Iraq.
So you bomb the oil fields?
I would bomb the hell out of them. I'd bomb the fields.
Let's talk about some of your potential opponents. Just give me your instant reaction.
Okay.
Jeb Bush.
I'd call him a stiff. I mean, I think he's a stiff. I watch him. I think he's somebody that doesn't want to do what he's doing. I don't know, is he being forced to do it?
Marco Rubio.
I think he's highly overrated. I think he's an overrated person. I look at him, they say he's a young Ronald Reagan. I said, I don't think he's a young Ronald Reagan. And besides that, I have far better hair than he does, okay?
How about Hillary Clinton?
What Hillary's got with the emails is, to me, scandalous. She gets of course, you shouldn't be talking to me about that, in all fairness. You shouldn't be asking me those questions, but I don't mind. What Hillary's done with the emails is incredible. She gets a subpoena, and then after getting the subpoena, she cancels it. She canceled everything. What she did is illegal. What she did is totally illegal. I don't know how she gets away with it. And we will make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're running on Reagan's 1980 slogan, let's make America great again.
No, that's not his. My slogan is different. My slogan is make America great again. He said he put the word let's, but he didn't use the word again. By the way, he didn't. That's incorrect. He said let's make America great. My slogan, and I never saw that.
Never saw this. Is from eBay.
Can I have it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I will. I love Reagan. You know, I was a friend of Reagan. I didn't know about this. It's fairly close, but mine is very simple. Make America great again.
And now you're off to Iowa. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Donald Trump has actually trademarked that slogan now.
Well, that's not that surprising. He's a businessman, George.
That's right.
Don't forget the let's.
Alex Sanchez, let me start with you. Your take on Donald Trump running, A, and B. Do you think he's going to win this thing next year?
You know, when I think of Donald Trump,